Welcome back to Resilience with Tasha Schuh. I am so glad that you are here. Sometimes the hardest moments in life aren't the big, dramatic ones, they're the quiet ones when reality hits you in a way you weren't ready for. This is episode 7, Rebuilding Me, the Fight of Rehabilitation, part 2, the emotional battle. In the last episode, I shared more about what rehabilitation looked like day to day, the therapy, the routines, the people who are helping me push forward. And today, I want to continue that story, but also start to share some of the moments during that time that began to shift things for me emotionally. Because even within the structure of therapy and care, there were moments that changed everything. Now, before we dive in, if you have been enjoying this podcast, I would love for you to subscribe and share it with someone who could benefit from learning more about resilience, learning more about my story. And if you're looking for more tools, resources, or ways to continue growing, you can check out my website at tashaschuh.com. And before I go any further, I just want to say something really quick. There are so many details from this time in my life. Truly, I could turn these podcast episodes into hours and hours of stories. So this episode might be a little longer than some of the others because there's just so much that I want to share and so much that I don't want to leave out. I mean, these moments were such a big part of my journey, and I feel like they really matter. They matter to understand what this season of my life looked like. So I hope you'll stick with me through this because it's really important for me to share all of it with you. So, and I also have to mention that I'm doing my best to go through this in chronological order. But if there's a little overlap along the way, I just want to thank you for your grace with that. There's just so many details, so many things, and remembering what I shared in the last episodes. I also want to say that I know that many of you have read my books. And while there is some overlap there too, I've been really trying to share pieces of my story that maybe I didn't include in my books. And so if you do want to read about other aspects of my story and things that I'm not including in the podcast, my books are available on my website at tashaschuh.com/shop. And I'll be sure to add that link into the notes. All right, so let's get back into where we left off on the rehab unit. Really doing my therapies and trying to adapt to this new life. And I think something that's really important to understand about this time in my life is the environment that I was in. I was the youngest person on the rehab unit. There was one other man who had a spinal cord injury similar to mine, but he was in his 50s. I was 16, almost 17. And he really wasn't open to talking. And it seemed almost like everyone else on the unit had experienced strokes or brain injuries. And so I really struggled to find people that I could connect with, people who were living this, people who could show me what life looked like moving forward. And it made it really, really hard because I didn't have a clear picture of what my future could be. I didn't see someone like me living the life I had dreamed of, and that made everything feel more uncertain. And on top of trying to adjust to all of that, I was going through some really significant moments during that time. I mean, I spent both my birthday and Christmas on the rehab unit. My birthday is December 19th, so it's right there, like just days before Christmas. And just before my birthday, I was really struggling with eating. I had a feeding tube that went up my nose and down in my throat and into my stomach. And every time I tried to swallow food, it would get caught on the tube going down my throat. Felt like I was choking. It was such an awful feeling. So I really stopped eating most foods and was mostly drinking things like Ensure or Carnation Instant Breakfast. Longtime favorite of mine. But they did not give me enough calories. And so I was losing weight really quickly. Weight that I couldn't lose. So I was already so thin. But I also had my birthday coming up, and my friends were coming down from school to celebrate with me. And I did not want this tube sticking out of my nose. I did not want that to be part of the moment, but mostly I did not want that to be part of the pictures that I knew people were going to be taking. So I made a deal with my doctor. I told him that if he took the feeding tube out, I promised that I would do everything I could to get enough calories on my own. Plus, that tube wouldn't be there choking me. He agreed. Now, I still remember what it felt like pulling that tube out. It was one of the strangest experiences I've ever felt. Definitely not fun, extremely painful. I have a very sensitive nasal cavity, so anything that goes up my nose, hate it. But I was so glad to have my nose and throat free from that tube. And then Christmas came. And that was something I never thought I would experience in a hospital, let alone my entire family experience with me. But they did. They showed up, they adapted, and we celebrated Christmas not around our tree at home, but in a hospital room. And I remember, I get emotional just talking about this, but my brother gave me, he was so excited to give me his Christmas gift. And it was a Tigger nightgown. And I kept it for years because it meant so much to me. I mean, I've always loved Winnie the Pooh. And honestly, I could really relate to Eeyore and how he felt during that time. But I was trying so hard to be Tigger, to find joy, to find gratitude, even in the middle of everything that was changing, everything that was so hard, everything that was unknown. And that nightgown really became a reminder of that for me. And one of my caregivers actually had that gown turned into a teddy bear and have it in our bedroom as a memory of all that I went through. Just, that Christmas was it's so sad that my family had to go through that with me, but they showed me that it didn't matter where we are, we were still family. So as I was navigating rehab, I was doing my best to figure out what really knowing was what was ahead. I mean, one of the hardest things that happened during this time was something I didn't even see coming. Up until this point, I've been using that red hospital wheelchair. And I really didn't think much about it. It's part of my day, part of therapy, part of getting from one place to another. There was really no big meaning attached to it. No matter where, someone sat me down and said, "This is what your future is going to be like." And then one day, I came into therapy, and Neil was standing there with a smile on his face. And next to him was this black power wheelchair. And I remember looking at the wheelchair, looking at him, then back at the wheelchair, and just slowly shaking my head like, no. And he looked right back at me and shook his head. Yes, this was happening. And I remember thinking, wait, what? Where did this come from? No one had prepared me for this moment. No one had told me this was coming. And suddenly, there it was. Not just a different wheelchair, but something that felt very, very different. Now, this was on a Friday, heading into a weekend. I'll never forget this. And I do share more of this in my book, so I won't go into every single detail, but I will tell you this. I was not happy about it. Not even a little bit. I mean, when he put me into that chair, it didn't fit. It was a loaner, so it wasn't custom fit to my body. And I could feel that immediately. I mean, it was so uncomfortable. It was so awkward. And then he wanted me to drive it. And I remember trying, and it was a mess. I mean, I was jerking all over the place, running into things, trying to figure out how to control it, and feeling completely out of control at the same time. At one point, I actually went through a doorway and actually ripped the armrest right off the chair. And that was it. I mean, I just lost it. I started crying because I did not want to be in that wheelchair. And Neil comforted me, but he knew this was a moment that had to come. He probably waited until the last minute to do this because he knew it wasn't going to be easy. Because if I'm really honest, it wasn't about the chair. It was about what it meant. Because in that moment, something started to click for me. This just wasn't therapy anymore. This felt like my future. This felt like my diagnosis becoming real in a way that I hadn't had to face yet. And I didn't want to accept that. So going into that weekend, I came up with a plan. I convinced the weekend therapist that Neil had said that I didn't have to use the black wheelchair, that I could go back to using the red one. Somehow, I got my way. And I remember feeling like I had won, like I had taken back a little bit of control. But by Monday morning, Neil had learned all about my little scheme and he made it very clear that wasn't going to happen again. And I hated that chair. I mean, I truly hated it. My mom has told me that I wouldn't even let them keep it in my hospital room. They had to leave it outside because I didn't even want to look at it. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to be reminded of what that represented because I wasn't ready. I was not ready to accept that this was my life now. And that wasn't the only change that I wasn't ready for. And I think in that moment, I realized something else too. This was not going to be a one-time thing where I didn't get my way. Change was going to keep happening over and over and over again. And I wasn't ready for it. I've never really liked change. I'm someone who loves stability, comfort. I mean, I think that's only human, really. I am someone that wants to know what to expect. And I think, like I said, a lot of us are this way. But in this season of my life, everything felt uncertain. Everything felt like it was shifting, and I didn't feel in control of any of it. But this is also where Gail came into the picture. Now, I had a lot of amazing nurses, and I hope I've said that in my earlier podcasts. Amazing nurses. I could talk about them all day long. But Gail was a nurse who had been assigned to me sometime in January. She was an LPN, and I noticed that right away on her name tag, which made me extremely nervous. Because at this point, I was still very afraid of dying. I was still having complications with my breathing, still needing help coughing, still feeling like everything was fragile. And in my mind, I had convinced myself that only an RN would be qualified to care for me. And I did not hide those thoughts. I remember expressing my concerns, and she was very abrupt with me, very short with me in her response. And I immediately decided I did not like her. But she informed me that she was going to be my nurse for the rest of the week. She had been assigned to my unit and to me in particular. And I just remember feeling so uncomfortable and honestly pretty unhappy with the situation. Later on, she shared with me that she actually had been incredibly nervous caring for me. She had heard stories about my sister and how protective she was. And she said she had sweat dripping down the back of her legs because she was so nervous. And I can honestly say, I don't think my words were helping her confidence at all. But then something shifted. By the second day, we started talking more. We started connecting, and I quickly realized she was actually one of the best nurses at coughing me. And if you're not familiar with what that means, I literally needed a nurse to push on my diaphragm when I would try to cough to help get the secretions out of my lungs because I couldn't do it on my own. And the muscles surrounding my diaphragm were now paralyzed. So I didn't have the strength to physically cough up those secretions. So I needed someone to help me. Now, to give you an idea of what that would look like, what it means to be coughed, I want you to just picture the Heimlich maneuver, but from the front of someone, not behind. And they just push to help break up those secretions. So that's what they did to help me cough at that time. Now, around this time, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, I had actually had my tracheotomy removed. And I hadn't needed to be suctioned for over a month. So they felt really confident taking it out. But remember, that's a hole in my neck where I was breathing through, getting suction through. But when that hole in my neck started to close, my lungs began filling with fluid again, and I couldn't cough it out. They tried putting a tube up my nose and down into my lungs to suction me, but it didn't work. So I had to be taken down to surgery for a bronchoscopy. And what made the doctors nervous about that, and what I did not mention earlier in my story, was, do you remember when my body crashed? At that time, they were actually doing a bronchoscopy. So this time, they refused to put me under because they did not want me to crash again. So I had to stay awake through the entire thing. And it was one of the worst things I've ever experienced. It was extremely painful, and I was terrified because now my trach was gone. And when I needed help, they couldn't just suction me the way that they had before. Now, things did eventually stabilize, but I still had pockets of fluid that I couldn't clear. So I needed to be coughed. And sometimes that would go on for up to an hour at a time. And I remember thinking, what is this doing to my body? What is this doing to my insides? Because they were pushing so hard over and over again. Like I said, sometimes up to an hour or two at a time. But it was the only relief that I could get. And Gail was incredible at it. If I was in bed, she would literally climb up onto my bed, straddle me, and use all of her weight to push on my diaphragm to help me cough. And she knew exactly how to do it in a way that worked. And I just remember thinking, I want her to be my nurse every single day. Because there were other nurses that I didn't always connect with as well. And I shared, in one of my earlier podcasts about the nurse that was kind of butting heads with the one who really wanted me to be happy and chipper in the mornings. And that was not happening. I was a teenager and I was not going to wake up cheerful and ready to go. And she was also struggling with coughing me, which made the times that she was my nurse really even harder. But Gail, she got it. And then there was Val. Gail and Val were good friends outside of work, and the two of them together, oh my goodness, they were just fun. They were funny. They brought a completely different energy into my room. And during a time when I was starting to have more difficult days where I didn't want to take a shower, days where I didn't want to do the extra cares, days where I felt done, they found ways to make me smile. We would talk about TV shows. I mean, we all watched Days of Our Lives, so we were constantly catching each other up on what was happening, talking about the newest storylines and characters, and we had nicknames for each other. And there was just this lightness that was brought into such a heavy time. And I'll never forget one day in particular. I don't remember exactly what had happened, but I remember it just being a really, really hard day. One of those days where I just wanted to get back into bed after therapy, pull the covers over my head, and cry. And instead, Gail and Val came into my room. They turned on the Carpenters, which I didn't even know who they were. Someone had given me a Carpenter CD as a gift. And one of them grabbed a hairbrush. The other grabbed a curling iron. And they started singing along with the Carpenters. They were dancing around my bed, performing like they were on stage, until I couldn't help it. I started laughing, joining in with them. And in that moment, everything felt just a little bit lighter. And those are the moments that I will never forget because they taught me something so important, that even in your darkest days, there are people who will go out of their way to help you smile again. And sometimes that's exactly what you need to keep going. It was also around this time in therapy that Barb started introducing something called the deltoid machine to me. Now, this was a machine that would help strengthen my arms and give me more control and precision in my movements, especially for everyday activities like feeding myself, mostly feeding myself, but other daily activities too. And every morning she would bring it in, she would strap it onto my arms. And well, it's hard to fully explain over a podcast what it was doing and how it was helping me relearn how to move in ways that could give me more independence. I think the best way to explain the deltoid machine is to picture a puppet and the strings attached. And this is what it looked like because it helped really make things easier for me to do that I needed to relearn. And keep in mind, my arms were very weak from being in that coma for 8 days. trying to build back that strength, and that machine was helping me do that. And so as I got further along in therapy, Barb started asking me more questions about what I wanted my life to look like when I left the hospital. What did I want to be able to do on my own? Was one of her questions. And one of the things I said was that I wanted to be able to do my own makeup. And she took that seriously. She started modifying my makeup brushes, adjusting them so I could actually hold them and use them, and we would practice. And little things like that might seem small, but in that moment, that felt really big because it wasn't just about makeup, it was about independence. It was about identity. It was about holding on to a part of myself that still felt like me. But at the same time that I was working toward gaining independence, there was a lot of change at home. It was during this time that my mom made the decision that the house we had lived in for 26 years was not going to work for my needs. And she told our family that we were going to be building a new house. And I have to tell you that not one of us was happy about it. I think my dad took the news the hardest, but all of us were feeling it because once again, everything was changing. I wasn't just adjusting to a new body, I was losing the home I had grown up in, the house with our pool, our hot tub, the place where so many memories had been made. And I remember feeling like this was all my fault. Watching my family process that loss, seeing the heartbreak, knowing that this decision was being made because of me. But my mom, she had to be strong. Even when we didn't understand it, even when we didn't agree. And looking back now, I can see that she was making the right decision. But in the moment, it did not feel that way. So they started drawing up floor plans, choosing a builder, and I could see the stress starting to build. I could see it was wearing on my mom, and I could see my parents' marriage starting to struggle more and more. For years, I'd always believed that my mom was the one being hard on my dad, that she was the one being mean. And my dad was quick to step into that role of the victim. And I sided with him my entire life. But what I would later come to understand was that there was so much more to that story, that my mom had been carrying far more in that relationship than I had ever seen. But at that time, I didn't know that yet. And at that time, I just saw tension, stress, change, and I felt like I was at the center of all of it. And it was also around this time that another change happened. As of January 1st, my care team made the decision that no one could stay overnight with me anymore. Now, I knew this day was coming. I knew it was coming, but it did not make it any easier. It was here that my mom moved to the Ronald McDonald House, and I knew that if I needed anything, she could be there in just a few minutes. And that brought me so much peace because honestly, I was so afraid to be alone. I was so afraid that my family was going to leave me. And she continued working from the Ronald McDonald House. She was paying all the bills, doing all the paperwork for our grocery store. And then she'd come and be with me during the day. But at night, I was on my own. And even though I had already shared earlier how hard those nights were for me, and this was a time where I would grieve, cry, and process everything that was happening in my world without having to perform for those around me, try to have a smile on my face. This was a new level of independence that I was not ready for. And at the same time, my world outside of the hospital was still trying to move forward. My friends were starting to talk to me about prom. And at most high schools, senior prom is the big one. But at Ellsworth High School, it was the junior prom. And they were already talking about making sure that I would be back in time. And I remember hearing that and wanting that so badly, but also knowing things weren't the same. Because around this time, Travis, my boyfriend, was starting to come less and less. Unfortunately, he had actually broken his ankle during wrestling. His dream was to go to state for wrestling, and my heart still breaks for him because I know that there were two things that he loved deeply during that time, me and wrestling. And in a very short window, he had lost both. And he was trying to hold it together. But as he was processing his own loss, I could feel him pulling away. And I started to feel something that I didn't want to admit, that this relationship might not last. Now, there was a spinal cord injury manual that the doctors and nurses had given me and kind of forced me to read through it. It was thick. And there was a section in there about relationships. And I remember sitting down with Lisa, one of my other favorite nurses, one day talking through that part. And she was like, I just want to go through this section with you. I want to go through some of the things. And then she asked me a question. She said, what if things don't work out with you and Travis? I was like, oh, they will. And then she said, but what if they don't? And I was like, oh, they will. He loves me. It's going to work. And then she asked me again, but what if it doesn't? And in that moment, something shifted because I realized what I had been avoiding, what I hadn't wanted to see, that Travis and I were heading in two different directions. He was at home, wanting to be with his friends, wanting to party, sometimes even doing things just to make me upset. And I was here, fighting to figure out what my life was going to look like. And this injury, it was a lot. And if I'm being honest, I don't think we had the maturity at this time to navigate something this big. But I was scared because I thought, who would want me? I mean, if this relationship doesn't work, then what? I mean, he's my only chance at getting married. And so I stayed. I let him keep coming. I kept hoping and praying that this would somehow work out. But deep down, I knew. I knew that eventually it was going to come to an end. But I tried to push that off in my thoughts because I had so many other things going on. And I tried to focus on other lighthearted things like planning for prom. So if I was going to go to prom, that meant I needed to get a dress. But I didn't just want to pick one out from a catalog. So I wanted to actually go and find one. And that meant I needed to start doing outings from the hospital. So they planned one, and it was oh my goodness, quite the outing. It included a nurse, my physical therapist, my occupational therapist, my recreational therapist, my parents and siblings, and even a few friends. It was a full entourage going to the mall. And even though I needed a dress, the point of that outing wasn't actually to pick one out. The point was to see how I did. Could I get through the doorways? Could I hit the automatic door openers? Could I hit the elevator buttons? How would I handle being out in public? And that part was hard because it was the first time I was out in the world with people who didn't know my story, people who didn't know what I had just gone through. And I could feel the stares. Now, even though Rochester is home to the Mayo Clinic, people are more used to seeing different medical situations. It still felt different. I mean, I had been so sheltered inside the hospital that I hadn't even fully processed what it was going to feel like to be out in public again. But it went well. I'm back to the hospital. And then about a week later, my sister and I decided to take it a step further. We wanted to go see the movie Titanic. All of my friends who had visited had seen it. They kept telling me, Tasha, you have to go. It's so good. You're just going to love it. And after that first outing, my sister and I were like, okay, we've done this before. We can do this. But I will never forget sitting at the hospital entrance, waiting for the wheelchair accessible taxi to pick us up. And my sister and I looked at each other. Without saying a word, we both knew. We were scared. I mean, you could see it in each other's eyes. Like, should we be doing this? But neither of us said it. We just went. And as soon as the movie started, my lungs started filling up. And my sister had to cough me through the entire movie. The entire movie. I mean, she was apologizing to the people sitting next to us, who thankfully were incredibly understanding. But we did it. We left the hospital, just the two of us, and we survived. Barely. but we survived. Another miracle in my book. And after that, it was time to actually find a prom dress. So the following week, we went out on another outing, and this time I found it. It was a royal blue dress that just seemed to leap off of the mannequin. And I was so excited because now this felt real. Now I had something to work toward. I was going to keep pushing in therapy because I wanted to be home in time for prom, which was the third weekend in April. So I still had 2 months to go, and there was a lot more change that was coming. But progress was being made. I was learning, as I mentioned, how to do my makeup on my own. And Barb even taught me how to do my own eyeliner using a modified strap that wrapped around my hand. We were so excited about it. So excited about it that we went on to physical therapy to show Neil. Barb was like, "Look, Neil, Tasha did her own eyeliner." And Neil looked at me, kind of cocked his head sideways, and he goes, "That's nice, but her hips are crooked." Typical Neil. But it gave us a good laugh, and it's actually something that we talk about to this day. Like, us women were so excited, and Neil was like, "What's the big deal? Let's focus on our hips." Really funny. But it was also during this time, on February 5th, that they broke ground on our new house. And that moment, really, instead of feeling excited, just added to everything that was already building. The tension between my parents was getting stronger and stronger. They were starting to see that my insurance wasn't paying for most of my care, and they were getting phone calls demanding payment. And at the same time, my mom was trying to make all of these decisions about building a new home. And even though she had two close friends who were interior decorators helping her, she was really on her own. None of us were supportive. None of us wanted this change. And she had to carry that weight anyway. And I could feel it. And even with all the progress that I was making in therapy, I was starting to feel completely overwhelmed. There was just so much. I knew that Travis and I weren't going to make it. I could see my parents struggling, not just emotionally, but financially. And everything they had worked for all of their lives felt like it was being poured into my care in this new house. Their marriage was struggling. The only thing that I knew how to do at the time, try to keep a smile on my face. And then I would cry at night when no one was around, and I slept. I slept a lot. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but later in life, I would learn that sleeping excessively can be a sign of depression. And I was sleeping every chance I could get. My body was going through a lot, so that was probably another reason that I was always so tired, but especially on the weekends when the nurses would let me. I also really didn't care at the time. I didn't care about my hair. I didn't care about the typical day-to-day cares. The only thing I really focused on was on my makeup because I could do that during occupational therapy, like during that session, fit into those sessions. So it really didn't take extra energy outside of that. And honestly, it meant I could sleep longer. So on the outside, it probably looked like I was doing okay, but on the inside, I was struggling. And I know it's only normal. That's the norm, but I was struggling a lot. And at the time, I had a psychologist who would come in to meet with me, but we just did not connect. I would actually find excuses like, "I don't feel good today. I don't want to meet." And I'm sure he was a nice guy, but to me, he felt really boring. And I really didn't feel like opening up to him, especially because, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but he was able bodied. He could walk. And in my mind, I'm like, he can't understand what I'm going through. But there was someone that I did connect with, the chaplain. Her name was Kate. And I had so many questions about God. There were so many people in my life. Nancy and Deanie, they were coming to regularly pray for me. They were praying for healing. They were praying that I would walk again, that I wouldn't have to live with a spinal cord injury for the rest of my life. And I wanted that so badly. I wanted God to answer their prayers. I wanted my own life back. But every time they prayed, nothing changed. And I was so grateful for them. I was so grateful for their faith and their prayers. I had seen prayers answered in other ways, but not this one, not the one that I wanted the most. And I had so many questions. Where was God? Did he care about me? Why wasn't he answering this prayer? And Kate, she didn't come with all the answers, but she came with this calm, gentle presence. Her voice was soft. Her demeanor was so peaceful. And talking to her almost felt like a healing balm. I mean, she gave me space to ask questions, to wrestle, to feel what I was feeling. And even though I was still struggling, even though I was starting to spiral deeper into depression, she was someone safe to talk to. And that meant everything. And even as I was starting to process things internally, my body was still going through changes that I wasn't ready for. Around the same time, about 3 months after my accident, I was told that I could take my neck collar off. Now, I had been wearing that collar for 3 months. And honestly, it had become something that I depended on. It was stability, it was comfort, it kept me warm. And I know most people can't wait to take something like that off, but I didn't want to. I was terrified that my neck was going to break again. I mean, they had done the x rays, they had confirmed that everything was stable, that it was safe for the collar to come off. But that didn't change how I felt. I mean, I remember that first day without it. I wouldn't move. Not my head, not my neck. This is what I did all day. The only thing I would move was my eyeballs, my eyes. I would just look side to side, refusing to move my neck at all. And I know people around me thought it was funny. It did give them a very good laugh. But I didn't think it was funny because the fear was real. I mean, I was so afraid of injuring myself again, of making things worse, of something going wrong. And honestly, I didn't like being without it. That collar had kept my neck warm. And without it, I was constantly cold. My shoulders would tense up trying to compensate, and that would cause pain in my neck. And even months later, when I was home, there were times that I would put my neck collar back on just to feel that warmth again, just to feel that sense of security. And while I was struggling in so many ways internally, I also had people in my life who could see it. And my friends were a huge part of helping me laugh, helping me work through some of that depression, even when I didn't realize what I was going through. And one of those friends was Stevie. Now, I had many friends. I could talk to you all day about the friends that I had. But Stevie did so many things to make me laugh and to get me out of my room. Now, during this time, Tommy Boy was a huge movie, and he was constantly quoting it, and it never failed to make me laugh. He was also He's kind of a force for me in the best way to get out of my hospital room. It was winter, so I couldn't go outside for fresh air. And that didn't definitely going outside would definitely have not helped my lungs. But there was a place in the hospital called the meditation room. It was up on a different floor. So we would go up there with a couple other friends who were visiting. And I'll never forget this. Stevie would steal a nurse's stool without them noticing, of course. And he would ride behind my wheelchair. And I would go as fast as I could. And he would be flying behind me, whipping, going side to side. And we would just laugh. And those moments, really looking back, I mean, they meant everything because they gave me a break from everything else I was carrying. And I was so thankful for those friendships because I know they were struggling too. Stevie had actually been there the night of my accident. And I'm not for sure, but I think he carried a lot of guilt, feeling like he should have caught me or stopped it from happening. But instead of pulling away, Stevie showed up. He was probably there more than anyone else, visiting me, supporting me, just being there. And he even rode with my grandma Thalker to Rochester one time because he didn't have his license yet. And let me just tell you, that was risking his life. It's honestly a miracle he survived because my grandma Thalker was not the best driver. But that's how much he cared. I mean, that's a story we laughed about for so long because when he got to the hospital, his face was like white, Like, I don't know how I'm here. I don't know how I'm alive. And he rode home with my dad. But that's how much he wanted to be there for me. And sometimes he was there a little too much. My boyfriend Travis would get jealous, but I knew Stevie's heart. He wasn't trying to cause problems. He just genuinely cared about me, and I will always be so grateful for that. My friends were a huge part of my recovery and my mental health. And it was also around this time that I started having different news outlets come and do follow up stories on me when I was in rehab. And I remember Care 11 doing a story, but the other one that really stands out to me was the Star Tribune. They were one of the first to come in and actually ask me what happened the day of my accident. And the truth is, I really didn't know. I had been on so many medications in the weeks after my injury, and I had tried to piece it together of what happened in my own mind, but I had never actually talked it through with anyone that was there. I had never confirmed the details. So when they asked me what happened, I actually told them the wrong story. I actually still have that article and I giggle when I go back to look at it. I'm like, that actually isn't what happened. I told them that my accident happened during the scene where the house lands on the Wicked Witch's legs. And that I was reaching down to grab the legs. I stepped back into the open trap door. But that's not what happened. Stevie was the one, thankfully, who gently corrected me. He told me what had actually taken place that night, and in that moment, things finally started to come together. The pieces started to make sense in a way that they hadn't before, and that was such a big moment for me because I was starting to understand the importance of communicating, of asking questions, of talking through what had happened instead of trying to carry it all on my own. Now, the guy writing this article also asked for an email address. And the funniest part about this, I didn't even know what an email address was at the time. But thankfully, one of the occupational therapists on my unit offered his email address. He was like, use mine. We won't set one up for Tasha yet. Use this email address so that people could reach out. And what happened next, I will never forget. I started receiving emails from people all over. People who were encouraged by my story, people who were praying for me, people who sent gifts. And keep in mind, I had already received hundreds, if not thousands, of cards in the mail from people who had heard about my accident. I was getting mail every single day. But now, with this article, oh my goodness, it was so different. People were sending gifts, they were sending blankets, angel statues, just thoughtful things that meant so much to me and my family, things that I actually still have today. And there was even a benefit held for me at the Sheldon Theater, the very place where my accident had happened, which just meant so much to me and my family. But those messages, those letters, they became something so much bigger. They became a reminder that I wasn't alone, that people cared, that other people had walked through hard things too. And in a really unexpected way, those emails even became a part of my therapy. In occupational therapy, I was learning how to use a voice activated program. So I would spend time responding to those email messages as part of my therapy sessions. So not only were they encouraging me, they were helping me rebuild and learn independence. And those messages, they're something I will never, ever forget. But even with all that support, there were still moments that caught me off guard. It was just another day in therapy. The routines, the exercises, and therapies I had come to know so well. And I had somewhat settled into a rhythm of the new normal, focusing on rebuilding strength, independence, and learning to navigate life in a wheelchair. And as I was rolling down the hallway that day, I passed a community room with a piano, and a woman was playing. And the music floated into the hallway, soft, beautiful, and almost haunting in a way that really caught me off guard. And then it hit me. I would never play the piano again. And it was in that moment that I realized something I hadn't fully processed before. With me no longer being able to move my fingers, I physically would never be able to play again. 8 years of lessons, hours of practice, music that had been part of me since I was a child. And just like that, it was gone. Up until that moment, I had been so focused on the big things that I would never be able to do again: sports, my daily activities, singing, that I hadn't even realized there were all these pieces of my life that I would need to grieve too. And the weight of it hit me like a wave. I held back my tears as long as I could. I tried to push it down like I had been doing with everything else, but by the time that I got down to the physical therapy room, which is where I was on my way to, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I leaned into Neil's arms and I just started sobbing. I couldn't even explain what had just happened. I didn't have the words, but he didn't ask. He didn't try to fix it. He just held me. And in that moment, his hug was more comforting to me than anything he could have said. But then I looked up and I saw people around me watching. And just like that, I stopped. I pulled it back in, wiped my tears, because I didn't want anyone to see me crying. I didn't want anyone to see weakness. I didn't want anyone to see that I wasn't holding it together. So I did what I had been doing. I stuffed it. But as I was getting closer to leaving the hospital, there were new realities starting to set in. My parents were dealing with so much, as I've mentioned throughout this episode: hospital bills piling up again, expenses building from our new home, and just so many unknowns. And we quickly realized that there were things that I was going to need at home that insurance wasn't going to cover. Things like a hospital bed and a shower chair. And this was really the beginning of me learning just how hard and how unfair the world can be for people with disabilities. I mean, that the very things that you need to function, to be safe, to take care of yourself, aren't always covered. And that was really, really hard, because one of the biggest concerns for me was the shower. I had a really hard time sitting up straight because I would get so lightheaded. And during rehab, I had been using a shower chair that tilted back. It really helped keep me from passing out, as it had a higher back that made me feel supported, and it could be reclined back further. So I'm with with the high back, it made me feel like I wasn't going to fall out of it. But that chair cost $2,000, and my parents couldn't afford it. And I remember feeling so overwhelmed, wondering how I was going to make this work when we went home. How was I going to shower safely? How was I going to manage something so basic, something so necessary? And it felt like one more thing stacking up. But then something incredible happened. Someone had heard about my story and donated the exact same shower chair that I had been using. Her husband had passed away and she no longer needed it. And so she also donated an air mattress and bed that I ended up using for many, many years. And once again, it was just another reminder that even in the middle of really hard circumstances, people show up. And I think what I struggled with the most during this time was the future. I mean, I would have good days and I would have bad days, but every time my mind would go down the road, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, thinking about getting married, thinking about having a job, thinking about having kids, and everything beyond that, I would start to grieve. Grieve the possibilities that those things might not happen. And every time I went there, I would spiral into a really deep depression. So instead, I tried to stuff it. And that's actually a chapter in my book called Stuffing It, because that's actually what I did. When I felt hurt, angry, overwhelmed, frustrated, depressed, even angry that this had happened to me. I mean, why me? Why did I have to go through this? I would just push it down deeper and deeper and deeper, hoping it would go away. And I would paste and force a smile across my face to prove to others that I was doing just fine. But I had been doing that for months. I had been on the rehab unit since the beginning of December, and now we were moving into late February, early March. And as I started thinking about leaving the hospital, which was now being discussed, and the decision that I wouldn't be going straight home, but instead transitioning to the Ronald McDonald House for a month while our new home was being finished. It was getting harder and harder to keep it all in, harder to keep that smile on my face. And then one day in occupational therapy, Barb and I were working together, probably playing cards like we often did to build strength in my arms with the reward of a Dairy Queen Blizzard if I won. And she looked over at me and she said, Tasha, how are you doing? Without even thinking, I gave the answer that I've been giving everyone. I'm good. And then she paused. She looked at me a little more intentionally this time and she said, No, Tasha, how are you really doing? And there was something about the way that she asked it this time. She didn't look away. She didn't move on. She just sat there waiting. And I could feel it. That moment where you realize you can't hide anymore. I tried to hold it together. I tried to keep that smile on my face, but I couldn't. And suddenly, everything that I had been holding in for months just broke. My smile disappeared. My eyes filled with tears. And I started crying in a way that I hadn't let myself cry before. Not just a few tears, but deep, uncontrollable, can't catch your breath kind of crying. All of it. Everything I'd been stuffing came pouring out. And I remember leaving therapy still crying, going back to my room where my mom was and just completely breaking down, telling her everything, that I knew her and my dad were struggling, that I knew Travis and I weren't going to make it, that my life was never going to be the same, that I didn't feel strong enough to do this. And I cried for hours. Everyone was crying. My mom was crying. Eventually, she left my room that night, still in tears, heading back to the Ronald McDonald House. And it was like everything that I had been carrying finally had somewhere to go. And that night, I cried all night. It felt like I had been carrying thousands of pounds of weight on my shoulders, and it was all finally releasing. I was letting it all go, even though I was embarrassed to cry in front of everyone. I just knew I couldn't carry it anymore. I couldn't be strong for everyone anymore. I had to let it out. And the next morning, when I woke up, I felt 1,000 pounds lighter. It wasn't that the depression was gone, but something had shifted. Through that crying, through that release, I felt an inner healing that I hadn't felt before. Not because everything was fixed, because I had finally let it out. And I was so grateful that Barb cared enough to push past my I'm good and force me to feel what I had been avoiding for so long. I realized that stuffing it wasn't working. Stuffing it wasn't healthy. I needed to be honest. I needed to be open, and I couldn't carry everything on my shoulders and try to be strong for everyone all the time. And not only did I feel that shift, the people around me felt it too. There was a lightness. And as I began wrapping up therapy and preparing to transition to the Ronald McDonald House, I could see how far I had come. I mean, when I first entered rehab, I couldn't even itch my nose. It took me a month just to build the strength to do that. And now I was doing my own makeup. I was feeding myself. I was responding to emails using a voice activated program or a typing aid. I could brush my own hair. I could brush my teeth. I was even getting better at driving my very difficult wheelchair, which I had finally gotten my own custom made chair that was fit to me. And I was feeling more and more comfortable in it each and every day. And I was also learning how to direct my care, which was something that they had been teaching me by bringing in new nurses and having me explain everything step by step. Now, I hated it a lot because I just wanted to be lazy and let the nurses do what they had always done. But this was really important because now when I went home, I would be in charge of that. I would know what I needed my caregivers to do. because I didn't want to rely on other people to just know what to do, but I wanted to guide them so that I could stay safe and healthy. And it was also during this time that I came across a motto that has stayed with me ever since: one day at a time. Now, someone had given me a poem, one that I was never able to find again. I have searched hundreds of versions of this poem. So many people have tried to help me track it down, but it was all about not looking too far ahead, not letting the future overwhelm you, just taking it one day at a time. And for me, that changed everything because I knew I couldn't look too far ahead. I mean, that's really when the depression would creep back in. And it still would many times in the years to come. But when I focused on one day at a time, sometimes one moment at a time, sometimes 5 minutes at a time, that's when I could breathe. That's when I could focus on what I could control. And that was enough. I just had to focus on giving my best, and that was all I could do. And it helped me so much. As I prepared to leave the rehab unit, the safety of my nurses, the security of the call lights, the people who knew how to care for me, people who loved me and didn't see my disability, I knew I had to take that mindset with me. It was scary. I mean, I felt for my mom, who was about to take on so much of my care at the Ronald McDonald House, which with caregivers that were going to come in to help me from an agency in Rochester. But my mom was going to be doing the bulk of it. But through that, I was on a better path. I was ready for the next step, to go home, to get back to school, and to get to prom. Now, I would still have many hard days ahead, but I was also seeing the progress that I had made and was ready to leave the hospital. Now, if this episode resonated with you, or if you've been following along in this journey, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here and for allowing me to share these moments with you. If you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe to this podcast and share it with someone who might need a little bit more hope or resilience in their lives or in their journey. So in the next episode, episode 8, we're going to continue this journey with finding my way, life after leaving the hospital. And I'm going to take you into what it was like to leave the safety of the hospital and move into the Ronald McDonald House, what it looked like to rely on my mom for my daily care, and how I prepared for and experienced prom, what it felt like to move into our new home, and the challenges and emotions of going back to school and stepping back into a world that really felt so different. I cannot wait to share that with you. See you next time.